energy infrastructure. In view of this, we need to facilitate better governance through better communication and increase our transparency. This will enable better and ideas and opportunities for everyone. Moving forward, ladies and gentlemen, harnessing the internet to increase productivity is vital. Significant advancement in internet connectivity in the last 2 decades has completely transformed the way people work. We have to continue to encourage the usage to cut costs, save time, and manage our knowledge base, especially amongst the youth. While we think of productivity, let us also take steps to ensure the internet does not become a risk to societal management. We need to enforce monitoring mechanisms and check constant abuse of the platform. This way, we can all enjoy this new era of internet advancement. We in Ghana remain committed in playing our role for the Africa agenda, and our expectation is that the commitment is replicated in our sister countries across the internet for immense benefits and development. I wish you all a wonderful stay in Accra, and God bless Africa. Thank you all.
Do we have a comment or a question for Honorable Nana Amadokua Esiama Ajay? I apologize for that mix-up at the beginning. Do we have a comment or a question? All right.
Good morning, Grace from Kenya here, and thank you for your for welcoming us to your town. I am just interested in hearing your thoughts on what your country is doing, or your country's commitment to not just having more internet access and more internet rights nationally, but also at a regional and continental level.
If I got your question quite right, what you would want to know is how we are ready to work to replicate this in Africa as a total. It is through such forums that discuss and know our strengths in various countries and our weaknesses in other countries, and offer the necessary assistance that we can assist if we need to, and tap into whatever knowledge and advancements that you may have gone through in your countries. I hope I have answered your question.
Any other comment or question?
Thank you, madam. My name is Hamdan Ghanian. Please, I wanted to find out how far Ghana is going with their right to information bill.
I was actually expecting this question.
Okay.
Before we went on recess in Parliament, it was still on the consideration stage. It's a bill that almost every Ghanaian is looking up to, and we must make sure it comes with all the conditions that will benefit each and every one of us. So even for every clause, the kind of debate that we usually go through in Parliament, it's taking longer than we expected. But it has been laid, and it is at the consideration stage. I'm sure by the time Parliament fully resumes, we are in Parliament now for this week, but it's not a resume. We are resuming in October, and I'm sure we'll go through it, and it could be passed if we are done with it, with the consideration. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, Deputy. Thank you for the presentation. We see on the program, quite rightly, that there's something about cybercrime which Ghana is seeking to play a role in which is great. But in the light of increasing terrorism threats, we live in a region in which is quite unstable. We have still issues with the Sahel. We have terrorist sleeper cells, these kind of things. What kind of strategy does the government have, or is there any sort of assurance that the government can offer us on protecting us, treading a fine line between protecting our freedom of rights whilst also protecting us at the same time? There are obviously things that cannot be put out in the public for security reasons, but what assurances can you give us that you will still give us access to the necessary information that we need online, but at the same time still protect our rights and still be able to protect us from some of these emergent threats?
Okay. One major challenge we have as a country is our record keeping. That's why, as it is now, we are trying to make sure that every Ghanaian citizen is captured and we have all the data and biodata and every information hereby needed for every Ghanaian. That is one step to solve the issue of being able to detect who is doing what, and then so that the government can also fully be able to share every kind of information. In our foreign countries, there are times when, even when you are in a hotel or you get access to any kind of network somewhere, and you download something and you are not able to, something you are not supposed to download, right then you are able to receive an email here and just because of the kind of records that they have. But unfortunately, truth be told, here in Ghana we do not have that luxury yet. But hopefully by the time our data is captured in this national identification system, that problem will be half solved. And I'm confident that our national security is well equipped with their cyber specialists to be able to deal with it. And the halfway bit is capturing our data and making sure that we have everybody's record. Thank you.
I know that she has to be somewhere. She was here early and we started late, but if you could take 2 more questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy. My name is Joshua Altepapu, Access Ghana Coordinator. The whole issue is, in Ghana now, we are facing a lot of challenges within the information system. I want to know, what are you doing for people in the grassroots level, especially the isolated areas where we don't have any access? And also, I'm also a member of the coalition of NGO in Right to Information Bill, in which we are also fighting for that. But I want to know, what are we doing? Because now we are facing a lot of challenges within our community, especially the rural areas. What is the Ministry of Information doing to collaborate with the CSOs who are working on these areas? Thank you.
If I get you right, what you want to know is how to get the citizens informed, right? Okay, well, just as you said, per the Ministry of Information's mandate, we have to disseminate information on government policies and government programs, and also to gather feedback and send it right to the government to let the government know on how people are accepting and understanding whatever information or whatever policy or program it is. And we do these through our various agencies and then the ministry's programs. When I mention our agencies, it includes and departments, it includes the Information Services Department, which are currently present in almost every district but for the new districts that were created. So through the Information Services Department, they organize government campaigns and they update the people on all these things. And also the other programs that we usually hold. We have the town hall meetings where as ministers and sometimes the members of parliament and the municipal or district or metropolitan chief executives go down to the people, organize a town hall meeting and then address them, pick up questions. We also have the Meet the Press series that various ministers come to the Ministry of Information. They meet the media and then answer certain pertinent questions that the media will pose to them. And then we also have the National Policy Summit. In fact, I'm just returning from Tamale. We had our 4th National Policy Summit there sometime this week. And over there too, we discussed the government's flagship programs and every information that, thing that everybody would want to discuss. The implementing agents, as in the ministers or chief executives, are usually present from the ministries, departments and agencies, and after their presentation, should there be any alternative questions that were not addressed in the presentations, they are asked and then they find answers. So for now, these are the programs that we run with, and by, I'm sure the next time we meet, you would not have this question for me.
Good morning. Thank you very much for your very well articulated speech. My name is Grace Gidaiga from Kenya. I will tell you something that we do in Kenya. Every time we are doing a law, we actually reference Ghana. Data protection, Ghana has a data protection law. And that makes our government listen because it's another African government. So my question to you, and it's in relation to what someone raised, there's the Africa Union Cybersecurity Convention. And I'm just wondering, at what level is Ghana involved? There's also the internet governance principles that the AU is trying to come up with. So at what level are you involved?
Ghana has been involved in all these communities since from ECOWAS to African Union, right up to the United Nations. And for every role that we are supposed to play, we do play. Our security agents who are supposed to show up in such conferences, I mean in terms of cyber from national security here and there, they are involved, and we do play our role and make sure that we engage everybody that we engage. In the absence of no further questions, I would like to thank you so much for this session. Thanks for the participation and thanks for giving me your ears. And I'm hoping that you enjoy your stay, enjoy your session here, and I wish you a very good day. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Honorable, for taking the time to share with us. I'll very quickly send us off to our events for the day. We're going to breakaway sessions. Do we have a copy of the program? Do we all have a copy? Okay, so for those who do not have a copy, in this room, there's going to be the Cybercrime in Africa Policies and Legislation conversation. In room 1, Odwira, there's going to be Consumer Rights Protection in the Digital Age. In room 2, Kundum, Last with the Story, Fast with the Truth, Media Navigating Fake Facts and Hidden Truths Online. And that's going to be for the morning session. Later in the morning as well, in the main hall, which is here, we'll have a conversation on sexting and selfies, rethink privacy. We'll also have, these are lightning sessions, reimagining social norms on the internet. In room 1, Odwira, there'll be a conversation on code for online press. And in room 2, Kundum, there'll be another lightning session, 2 actually, one on customer service at what cost and litigating against social media taxation in Uganda. We'll then have a tea break at 11 to 11:30 if we keep time, and then we'll come back to the main hall, some of us who want to attend the privacy and personal data protection in Africa, trends and challenges. In room 1, Odwira, there will be advancing access to information through the internet, universality indicators. In Kundum, room 2, we'll have securing online rights through the African Declaration on Internet Rights and Freedoms Network. We'll have our lunch break. During the lunch break, there will be an informal session, a chat with Freedom Online Coalition representatives. At 2 p.m., we'll have in the main hall, which is here, protecting free speech and online dissent. In room 1, Odwira, there will be data-driven advocacy against shutdowns in Africa. And in room 2, Wikipedia 101, a practical session. Then a tea break. During that tea break, we are hoping, if we keep time, that we can show that video on internet shutdowns. Please let's try to keep time. And we'll close off right here. All of us will be expected to be right back here at 4 p.m. for the final session, which is Meet the Internet Freedom Donors at FIFA Africa 2018. We want to know, get to know who is supposed to be doing what. And we'd like you to come back because there's going to be, apart from all of this, a little gift for you. Please come back to this room at 4 to 5:30 p.m. Please let's go on to our rooms and let's be very quick at it so that we can utilize our time very well.
Good morning, everyone. So I guess everyone is staying here. You're welcome. We have a room. See, we even have space. Eric is here. Is Albert in the room? Could you please come? Benedict? Okay, please come to the stage. And Jimmy. Please. Okay, good morning, everyone. So we've got in the room with us today to discuss cybercrime in Africa, policies and legislation. The good thing is that the minister's representative, there was a reference to cybercrime and cybersecurity earlier, and what we want to do in this session is to talk about the trends on the continent. And we've got various stakeholders in the room. We've got Eric from the Council of Europe. If anyone has worked in this space, you probably have talked a bit about the Budapest Convention and other work done by the region. We've got Albert from the Ministry of Communications, who can also speak a bit to what Ghana is doing. We've got Benedict, who is a lawyer from Tanzania. And I'm sure that a few of us have questions about what's going on in Tanzania, and I'm sure you can speak to that. And of course, this panel will not be complete if we don't have a policeman on the panel, and this is great. So be very careful. We have a policeman here, and saying that if you're one of those people who have questions that are not connected to what we have discussed, I will a policeman, but we'll get to that. And what I want us to do is to start, and I'll start from you, Enric, is to start with an introduction. I know that you had a presentation, but unfortunately we lost 30 minutes already. But we'll start with a 2-minute summary of your thoughts on the trends, the issues as far as cybercrime is concerned, If it's also related to the continent, please also speak to that. If it's country specific, please feel free to speak to that also. Then I'll come back with questions, and then we'll go to the experts on the other side of the room to have an engaging session. Eric.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Good morning to you in the room. Well, cybercrime, what is it actually? On the cybercrime is crime that happens on the internet in cyberspace. But it is also, and that we should take into account, it's also ordinary crime that has a relation with networks and with systems that are connected to cyberspace. So it's a very broad area. When we're talking about fighting cyberspace, we mean crime in that broadest possible sense. When we talk about crime control, it's quite clear what we need is precise definitions of what should be criminalized. That's not so simple, but it's self-evident. You need a law that criminalizes certain conduct. Secondly, when you have that law, you should have procedures and legal powers to investigate. And investigate that crime in an IT environment is not that simple. You need, therefore, special powers, and in particular, when you look to internet crimes, a very important source of information for criminal investigations are the service providers, the internet service providers, because they avail over a lot of data of their subscribers. And that data, in most of the time, should be accessible to law enforcement. So what you need is precise rules under what circumstances law enforcement is able to cooperate with service providers to obtain that particular data. That's the second line. The third line of crime control, in my view, is international cooperation. Because in traditional crimes, victim and perpetrator are in the same room or in the same country. They may, when we talk about cybercrime, still be in the same room, but the crime has been committed over a line that is international. Or sometimes the victim is in another country than the perpetrator, and there is an international connection. So what is needed when you talk about efficient criminal investigations is also a good system of international cooperation. And that means international cooperation with any other country where the data you need, the information you need is stored, and where you want to obtain that information from that particular country. I looked to the Malibu instrument of Africa, which is a very ambitious and important instrument. But what is not in that particular Malibu instrument is international cooperation. There are more things that are not in the Malibu Convention, but we come to talk about that maybe later. So it's extremely important for African countries to have an instrument of international cooperation. Well, it will not surprise you that that instrument could be the Cybercrime Convention of the Council of Europe, which today has more than 61 active parties and quite a big number of other countries that partially or for a large part implemented the content of that Cybercrime Convention. Today we have, let's say, over 130 countries in this world that are in one way or another involved, connected with the Cybercrime Convention of the Council of Europe. So I would strongly argue that African countries see how they can get accession to this this instrument and what is needed to do that. Further, there is an important other issue of the Council of Europe, and that my colleague will elaborate further, and that is that countries can be supported not only in the field of legislation, but also, and that is extremely important, in the field of building of capacity. Doing investigations of cybercrime requires IT expertise. Yeah? So it's not enough to have legal powers and then do the investigation. No, you must have the capacity, the technical capacity to do investigations in cybercrime. And that's also a very important program of the Council of Europe. I will not further elaborate it at this moment, but it's the second important issue.
Okay.
I have one more point to make and then I conclude.
Okay.
And that is what I've seen, for instance, in the Malibu Treaty. You're talking here about human rights. They are extremely important. So what you need if you're going to make laws on criminal investigations, on international cooperation, you should need a reference to human rights. In Europe, we have the Rome Treaty of 1950, you have the UN Treaty of 1948, but I give you one extremely important rule of the Rome Treaty. And it says, if you must interfere with human rights of your citizens, you can only do it if it's necessary. With bold letters. Necessary means that is a concept of take always the easiest way, not the easiest way, but the best way, and it has a concept of proportionality. Do never more than is necessary for the investigation itself. That's an extremely important limitation. I learned from previous sessions here that some countries here in Africa see that different. They have strong rules of checking, controlling internet communications rather than give it free and only acting on behalf of criminal investigations when necessary. Thank you, Mr.
All right. Thank you. I mean, for someone who had an entire deck of slides, thank you for summarizing all of that. Let me come to you, Jimmy. You're with Uganda Police. So, you know, Eric has talked about international cooperation, he's talked about capacity building, he's also talked about rights. You know, you can touch on your other issues you want to talk about, but I would love to hear a bit from each of the countries, you know, Uganda, Tanzania, and Ghana, about because we've got that missing piece from the Malibu document, which is international cooperation. What are you doing in that particular area, in addition to the things you want to talk about? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Once again, I'm Jimmy Haguma. I'm the Commissioner for Cybercrime. I just want to first add something to what my brother has just said, that, for example, in our country, we have the Computer Misuse Act of 2011, Electronic Transactions Act, and then the Electronic Signatures Act, and others like the Regulation of Interception of Communication Act. But even not being on the internet, you can still commit a cybercrime, because there is also just having your own computer and someone steals that data either on a flash disk without your knowledge, or he may just deploy a LAN network like you talked of. They need to have internet, or they need to have IT knowledge. It could be the internet, or it could be the intranet. So be it on a LAN, be it on a WAN, it can be committed at that same time. Now, in the issues to do with the human rights, actually, it's very critical. For example, in our laws, Section 28 of the Computer Misuse Act requires that a digital forensic investigator, even when you have seized an electronic device in the due course of your investigation, you must have a court order to allow you to do what we call extraction, imaging, and processing of that device. Now, this has been the greatest challenge for many investigators and many ambitious investigators from the law enforcement side, because they believe that if I have seized your computer, I can just plug in my forensic tool and begin extraction. But it becomes challenging when you begin to adduce your evidence that you get a challenge. So these are some of the reforms that we have started in our very country. As far as 2018, we have issued out a circular compelling all investigators that you must obtain the court order, even if you are to get the call records of an individual for which you are going to use in courts of law. It's prudent that you get a call order. Of course, you don't rule out elements that Also, the state could have vested interests, especially in the area of prevention of crime before it occurs. So sometimes they carry out what called proactive intelligence analysis, which is purely for protecting of the state in the other side or the other. The other issue I wanted to bring about is the requirement for us to link together as different states. One of the things that we have taken on is to assent to the Budapest Convention. And this has been a process we've been working on with the new requirements of the GDPR, the General Data Protection Privacy, right from Europe, that requires your country to first of all comply to GDPR and thereafter move to the step of signing the Budapest Convention, which will now allow you to freely access information. But even without this in place, countries that are near each other under the East African Community, we have been able to revoke the mutual legal assistance and the treaty, and we can have assistance given to us under mutual legal assistance and support. The challenge is still big because, as you know, that we have a great challenge in Africa. We have a challenge of standards. We have a challenge of protocols. Many of us have got mobile phones that maybe are not compatible to some of the forensic tools that currently you're using in your basic laboratory. And so that still gives a challenge to the investigators. How can we put standards, protocols, and guidelines on what software do we use? Are we using licensed or we are using pirated, and so on and so forth? I thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's okay. This is one session where you can clap a lot. Now, so you mentioned something, and I'll come back to that in a second, about getting court warrants before police can go ahead and do some other things. You know, we'll talk about theory and reality in a second, but I'll come back to you. But let me go to Benedict. Benedict, you're a lawyer, right, in Tanzania. So I know we've got, you know, the government perspective, we've got, you know, the security agency's perspective. In Tanzania today, as far as cybercrime legislation is concerned and associated laws, what is the reality on the ground, and what can we learn from that?
Thank you. Yeah. As far as in Tanzania, when you talk about cybercrime, what is concerned, and my colleague also from Tanzania, they may agree with me, we may say is that it's a law which came to restrict freedom of expression for now. But because tracing on the background, in 2015, the Cybercrime Act of Tanzania was passed by the parliament, by the parliament for an act of urgency. But we have also another law which is called the Electronic Transaction Act, which of course is not used as what Cybercrime Act is used. What I'm saying, Cybercrime Act from now is Tanzania is used to restrict politician and freedom of expression, is because as soon as the act was enacted in September 2015, we are going to have a general election in October 2015. We witnessed where the act was used massively to suppress civil society organizations who were doing election monitoring. For example, I may give you a case, and that's where I come to see the point from my brother earlier that is very relevant. You'll see that one among the organizations which we are conducting the election observation is called the TASEO, together with Legal and Human Rights Center. They were raided by police, and then they confiscated more than 21 computers. They confiscated more than 30 telephones. And for them, what they're saying that we are going to do, the Legal and Human Rights Center, they've committed a cybercrime according to the section 16 of the Cybercrime Act, which of course prohibits publication of false information. So you may see, I may say in Tanzania, I think we have come up with the law in a time where the shrinking space of civil society is at stake, and that's where you find police officers, instead of interpreting the law in a clear manner, they just use it just to suppress civic space. Because if you try to read the Cybercrime Act, it provides specific in how a police officer can do investigation. But for them, simply because of either lack of awareness on how to use the law, they will say that during investigation, the police officer, they are capable of taking or confiscation the whole computer and telephones for those people who are suspected to be committed the cybercrime. While if you are trying to look on international practice and what my brother here has said in Uganda, it's very different. And that's why I'm saying I see the presence of Cybercrime Act in Tanzania right now is not used as what it's intended to be used. Because during the time when they were passing the law, they say that, nowadays we have a lot of electronic transaction in Tanzania. So we need to have a law which can control these electronic transactions. They say there's a lot of child pornographic online, there's a lot of women violence online, but in real sense right now in Tanzania, if you have to take the data on the implementation of the Cybercrime Act, you may have more than 300 cases whereby just a mere student, a mere youth who has been taken to court just because they've expressed themselves through a social media account. And that's why I'm saying I think the law in Tanzania is used not as the purpose which was intended to be used.
Thank you. And I'm sure that when you speak of Tanzania, you speak of many other countries across the continent. Let me just quick poll. How many of you in your own countries, you've seen a scenario where the cybercrime law has been used to either intimidate, question or arrest either a journalist or blogger or a citizen who said I haven't finished my question and the hands are already going up. Okay, I love this. Keep that energy, keep it. Let's listen to Ghana for a second and I'll come back to you. We're going to start with that, because there's policy in principle and there is practice in reality, and we're going to combine both and speak to this topic a bit. So let's come back to our host, Ghana. There is a question that the minister didn't answer earlier, but I'll come back to that question in a second. But let's listen to your own 2-minute take on the cybercrime policy space in Ghana at the moment.
All right. Thank you so much once again on behalf of my government and the Ministry of Communications, which has oversight responsibility over cybersecurity. We'd like to welcome all of you to join us here, especially on an important day for universal access to information. But this discussion is also relevant to us also because on the 1st of October, Ghana is launching its National Cybersecurity Awareness Month with quite a number of activities lined up in the course of the month. Before I give some key pointers as far as Ghana's cyber security development is concerned, I think I wish to also recognize the work that the organizers are doing together with our local partner, Media Foundation for West Africa. But most importantly, also the Council of Europe, which is leading the global effort aimed at building capacity, especially in a developing country like ours. I will give some few pointers as to Ghana's relationship with the Council of Europe as far as the Budapest Convention is concerned. Key pointers. The first presenter mentioned about 2 conventions which are relevant to us as Africans. He mentioned the Budapest Convention and also the African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection, also known as the Malabo Convention. Ladies and gentlemen, my friends, I wish to indicate that those 2 instruments are complementary in nature. If a question is asked, what is the relationship between these 2 conventions? They complement each other. I'm speaking not as an expert who have worked in that area, but also within the Ghana space. Currently, the government, through cabinet, is considering acceding, ratifying both conventions because of the scope that it provides. Of course, if you're talking of cybercrime response in terms of investigations and prosecutions, the question I normally ask is, let's profile the population as far as their use of internet services are concerned. And I can specifically point out email. Sample population of Ghanaians, more than 90% are likely to use Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, and other services. And the next question is, where is this data stored? You know, we have cloud services, system servers, which are certain in either in Europe or at least in the US. And you come to the police, you make a complaint, you have been defrauded through email impersonation, and you want investigation to be conducted to be able to prosecute a case. You cannot just walk to the US and say, I want data, the records, the metadata or content data to prosecute a case. You need certain level of engagement. The current system does not help speed up process, and hackers do not. The speed at which they operate, IP addresses are becoming almost dynamic. So you need an instrument like the Budapest Convention, where even a phone call, you can make a preservation order for evidence to be preserved to achieve that. So absolutely, that is the basis, the grounding for let's say an African country like Ghana to achieve a convention like the Budapest Convention. But it's also key to mention the continental effort, which also, there are two elements of that: cybersecurity and also personal data protection. It provides certain guidelines. Interoperability is key, or if we can also mention legislation interoperability or harmonization. The way cybercrime has emerged, it's very difficult for just one country to say, I'm just building my own system. For example, building a SET, computer emergency response team. There should be certain parameters that our set can be able to speak to the other sets. Therefore, if you have at a continental level certain legislative framework that gives you certain pointers to develop your own internal cybersecurity capacity, I think that is the key. That explains what I mean by the the complementarity of these two conventions. I think it is good I mentioned that. It is also good to reflect on the current state of cybercrime legislations. The Council of Europe has done a brilliant job assessing the global states, and I've picked statistics on the continent. Out of the 54 countries considered in the study, in 2013, only 46% out of this number had some legislation on cyber in place, substantive and also procedural. In 2018, ladies and gentlemen, more than 80% of countries on the continent have got one form of legislation or the other in place. It tells you the shifts by which countries are adopting cyber legislation to address the problem. Now let me come back to my own country, Ghana. The government recognizes the need to develop our country's cybersecurity ecosystem. There is no question about that. It has impact on us if we do not address those concerns. At the same time, the government also believes in the rule of law applicable in the cyberspace. Therefore, digital rights are key in the various legislations. Currently, we are reviewing the National Cybersecurity Policy Strategy document. We're taking key interests, and we've involved with the civil society to make input to ensure that it reflects, the various, democratic objectives that we want to advance our cybersecurity agenda. And it is also good to touch on capacity building as far as Ghana is concerned. I've mentioned about the fact that we are reviewing a policy. We had a policy which was introduced in 2011, but the technology environment has changed, and we are working on that. We have the Electronic Transactions Act, which was rated by Council of Europe to be one of the best legislations in the country. We couldn't have initiated the steps to accede to the Budapest Convention if we did not have the right legislation framework. However, the Ministry of Communication is still working for certain legislative amendments that will address current identified gaps. As far as wrapping up my intro, Council of Europe has shown example as far as criminal justice response is concerned. Ghana is a beneficiary of capacity building programs under the Glazy Plus project. Quite a number, of judges have been trained in terms of the handling of electronic evidence. There are two levels in terms of capacity building. Having the legislation is one, but operationalizing the legislation is also another thing. So where we are now is to make sure you build the capacity so that not just the investigators who should be able to deal with electronic evidence issues, but those who also prepare the docket and prosecute the prosecutors. But most importantly, who adjudicate the case, irrespective of the brilliant work that a police officer does, or a prosecutor presents his or her case. The final decision rests in the courts, and that is what we build in capacity of the judges. Next month, Ghana is training Supreme Court and Appeal Court judges on cybercrime and electronic evidence as part of our National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I think I will stay here. Yes, the minister is not, of course, there are certain briefs that should have gone in. Ministry of Information does not. I think maybe the moderator should have known this. It wasn't, I was sitting in there. Technically, in terms of cyber security issues,
I'm almost tempted to say don't do this.
It is within the purview of the Ministry of Communication. But any question that came out of that, or any additional question that you may have, I'll be happy to answer them.
I was going to say don't do this. You know, that's this ministry, that ministry thing. But you already did. Don't worry. I'll come back to you. I was asking a question earlier, and I'll finish that question now. Can you please, by a show of hands, let me know if in your country you've had a scenario where the cybercrime law or a related law has been used not exactly to prosecute cybercrime in that sense, but as a tool to either, you know, arrest, detain, or question, or basically intimidate citizens who are expressing themselves. Anyone? I'm raising my hand, by the way. I'm from Nigeria. Okay, now that will help me start with a question. So, and I'll start with you, Ghana. I'll start from Ghana. And so the question that the minister didn't answer, the deputy minister didn't answer, that I would love for you to answer, and then there's a second question here. That question is, so Ghana loves to talk about what you're doing great, right? And people commend you for it. You know, the Kenyan in the room asked a question and said, oh, we reference you. But why is it difficult for African governments to tell themselves the truth? So many times we see that it's easier for people to copy bad things. So Tanzania does something, Uganda copies, Zambia copies. You copy a lot of bad habits across countries. But the good things that you tout and talk about and do documentaries on, we don't see you pushing with the same energy and trying to make other countries do the good things. So that question is what wasn't answered. And I would like to put you on the spot and say, why are African governments afraid of telling each other the truth? Why do you have to wait at times for a Council of Europe to tell you what to do?
You got to be very careful, moderator. No, I mean, I think we need to put things in perspective. I've been in government for a year now. I'm not in the private sector. That's why I did all this consult. And I think when you are the other side, the dynamics are quite different. You know, bilateral relationship is not somebody telling you what to do. I think I'm a technical person and I can speak straight to the issues. And I think that is exactly what I need to speak to. I need to operate at a technical level. Once again, I think there are two aspects of this. One, why is Ghana not impacting positively what is prevailing here on the other part? And two, why do, as Africans, sit down for somebody to tell us what to do? The first question, I didn't go into detail, but I will give specific examples. We have set up an institutional framework within the past 1 year in terms of, you know, cybersecurity capacity building. One of the problems that we have identified on the continent is there are some kind of capacity building programs, but you don't have organizational structure systems that will sustain the process, even when one government, you know, replaces the other. To also ensure accountability, reporting structures. We've created a system like that, and we had a lot of people from Nigeria, Americans brought in Niger to come and study our system. When we travel abroad, it's presented. It is a model that integrates both governmental and non-governmental sector. This is one. we set up a technical working group at the national level because essentially the problems we have here is the coordination and engagement, information sharing. So you have law enforcement agencies who are not even talking to each other. Yeah. We've created a system like that, which was inaugurated by the president last year. And ECOWAS is currently adopting that model. ECOWAS is setting up ECOWAS Cybersecurity Technical Working Group. This was borrowed from what Ghana has already done. Indeed, and it's on record, Council of Europe has identified Ghana as a hub for West Africa English-speaking countries. You can write and verify. But as I said, these are not things, unless you ask, you go out there singing. You know, I'm a technical person. But these are specific examples that shows you the impact that we're making on the other, side. On the issue of the government in Africa sit down to be told, is not really the case, right? Sometimes the dynamics, changes. You have all sort of issues, and you need to identify the priority to make a case. Sometimes you also even need consultants. The knowledge gap of people to be able to make a case for some of those things sometimes are lacking in our government, right? And I'm telling you, even within the last year, what has transpired within the cybersecurity space, and I believe Ghanaians will be here in October, some of those things will manifest. Sometimes that capacity is not really even about the money. I don't believe that. Some people committing, sometimes you need rare commitment of people who can then influence political leadership. So, I mean, the idea of shifting the burden on government, I don't play that. I believe that advocates, for example, from the civil society, being knowledgeable can influence decisions in government towards, building capacity. I would like to discuss that rather than blaming government. But the other thing is also bilateral relationships are quite key. You have global bodies, African Union, which sit down, take certain decisions. And, geopolitical politics may also play a role, which we may not, be privy to. But I think these are the pointers I can share with you as far as engagement with international partners are concerned. I believe decisions should be based on certain pragmatic imperatives. Now the question is, have we made that case with empirical evidence to push our government towards a certain direction? Until you present that to me, I wouldn't like to take that argument. It's good. We need to make a case. You need to advocate, show the commitment with empirical evidence. Thank you.
Empirical evidence. All right. You want to jump in, Eric? Yeah, you can react to that very quickly, and I'll come back to.
Yes, sorry, it's always difficult for me as an outsider to hear about those stories, where I think, in normal countries, you should obey to the rule of law. And the rule of law means that there is a legal statute. And abuse by government or by public authorities of such rules should be punished, either by the judges, either by, for instance, an international institution. In Europe, under the Rome Convention, we have a special court in Strasbourg, where you can, as individual, complain about a violation of your human rights by public authorities of your country. And that's an extremely important feature. Well, you don't have it yet, but it's still to look at the way how you could control governments, to stick to the rule of law and protect the citizens of that country against wrongful doings, abuse of measures, abuse of law. So that's a general question which I cannot debate you because I'm an outsider, but I just wanted to say how we do it in Europe, and maybe it can help you, inspire you, looking for a solution and what direction you should look for the solution.
Well, I was coming to you, but before you make that comment, you made a very brilliant, Jimmy, you made a very brilliant, statement about making sure that you follow the process, right? You get a court warrant before you do that. Now, we know for a fact, right, that is not the reality on the ground. Why is it so? And what are Let me allow you to do that, and I'll see if there's a comeback question on that, because I have a feeling you know my question and you answer it before I ask. Just go ahead.
Yeah, but briefly, that what you mentioned is not different from what is in Africa. I think the point that we don't seem to pick out is that when someone, for example, is arrested on maybe an allegation or suspicion, it's not that they are guilty, because the law says they are innocent until proven guilty by a competent court of law and jurisdiction. The fact that someone has been harassed, there are processes. I have had instances where cases have been thrown out of court for issues of failure to adduce procedures. One in case has been CCTV retrieval. Our law requires that if you're to retrieve a footage, you must have either a court warrant or a consent. Even if you proceed with that investigation, it can be appealed against. So I believe we are not different. The only thing is that probably we don't seem to trust our criminal justice systems. Yes, that's true. At times we feel that, oh, if my case goes to this person, I think I'm finished. But it's in us to inculcate, it's in us to advocate, and not believe that when someone has been arrested also, it's their gone case. There is still room for even appeal. There's still room for us to review those procedures. That's what I wanted to bring out. And then the issue of ensuring that you follow the procedure. It's true that you may not follow the procedure at law, because even the law permits the police officer, with or without, to proceed. However, you must explain substantively before courts of law under what circumstances were you not able to get that warrant. Was it an issue? There are scenarios where we have digital evidence is volatile in nature. And in such instances, if the courts of law, a crime has been committed on Sunday, maybe in your country the courts are not working on Sunday, you have reason to believe that every time you waste, you're going to lose critical data. Then you may have to move in. But again, these are things that you weigh depending on the circumstances. The procedure and what would be adequate is that you, as much as possible, ensure that you conform. There are even provisions in our law which are the order of preservation, order of disclosure of preservation. If we can really look back into our laws, I don't think that they are meant to actually terminate our freedoms, but we do not seem to understand how to use them, first of all, as law enforcement. And even the public themselves, they don't seem to know that they have this opportunity, that they can actually choose to use the law against the enforcement agencies and tell them, hey, the law provides this, why are you not doing this? I thank you.
I think that's an interesting statement about citizens knowing, the power they have against, at times, gun-wielding security agents. We've just had scenarios in a few countries where we've worked, where people, yes, they're not guilty until proved innocent, but some of them have spent 2 years not being charged to court. I think it's very interesting in that kind of scenario to assume that person has a right. Because they have a case to prove in a court of law. And you're right, people don't trust systems. In many of the cases that we've been involved with, those cases, in fact, one of our cases dragged so long that the judge died and had to be replaced. Okay, so let me come to you, Benedict. We've heard, I've been told that I should be careful in terms of government and all that, but honestly, I won't be careful when it comes to governments, because we finance that system through our taxes, and you work for us, and we'll put fire under your bombs for as long as you do that. If we don't make you uncomfortable, then we're not responsible citizens. So expect more of that. But what can we, you're a lawyer, and I know you've been involved in many cases. We've been involved in a few issues in Tanzania. But beyond what's happening in Tanzania, we've seen that there are a lot of citizens that are now pushing back. Also using the court of law and using name and shame of different countries also. But what can we do better as citizens? He's right, many times citizens don't even know that you can push back. In your own experience as a lawyer and as a citizen in a country where things appear to be on a decline as far as rights are concerned, what can we do living here to make sure that this traditional fight between security and rights, which seems to be winning, in which case security seems to be winning right now at the detriment of rights. How can we tilt that balance a bit so that, yes, we all want to be safe and secure, but our security should never, ever be used as an excuse to trample on our rights? What can we do as citizens to make sure that happens?
Thank you. For me, I think a response as I'm doing in Tanzania is, first of all, for those who are blessed to get educated like lawyers, first I think they have a duty to save or to give back to the public. And I may give you example of what I'm doing in Tanzania. Despite the fact that I do practice as a commercial lawyer, but I've done a lot of constitutional litigation around issues of Cybercrime Act. Right now also we are having another constitutional case around the new online content regulation which has been passed by the government. And it's good that sometimes the judiciary, they tend to hear what we are caring about. You see, trying to convince citizens to change in an era where even these issues are very new. You're talking about the interception, you're talking about surveillance, something which also for the citizen they may not understand. I think the first duty is for us lawyers, but also for the civil society. I may give you an example in Tanzania now. We have a social movement which is an online platform. It's called Change Tanzania, and it's good that their director she's also here. We are trying to use those platforms, at least for those people who are light, try to educate the public. Of course, one, the good usage of social media, also the good usage of electronic devices, but also in another way, we are trying to give them some tips on what to do and what not to do, because I also, as a lawyer, I also understand that some of these laws, they are there to protect like children, like women, but what I'm saying is that the government has to use the law in good faith and not to use the law to suppress civic space. That's what I'm thinking. So the first rule I would say is for civil society, first of all, to give like capacity building to citizens, to to make sure that they are aware of this law we are talking about. Because sitting here and then like trying to talk about comparison alliances between the Cybercrime Act of Tanzania and in practice what Ghana they are doing, that in that level someone like me can do. But in this sense, a normal citizen who's just brought a smartphone and trying to express his or her view in social media, and then all of a sudden they are come to arrest him. I think, despite the fact that we have principle in law which say that ignorance of law is not a defense, but for me, I still believe that ignorance of law, especially in cybercrime offenses, it's a defense. So we have a lot to do as a lawyers, but also as a civil society.
All right, thank you. I don't want to be selfish. I know a lot of people in the room have questions. Do we have a roving mic? Otherwise, I'm happy to take this around. Okay, so I know we've... ouch. All right. Questions. Can we take... I'm almost tempted not to come in that direction because that hand has been very active today. 1, 2, and 3. I'll take... Okay, 4 questions. Okay, I'll take these 4 questions. Do you guys have pens or... Okay. So we'll take all the 4 questions. I'll come back to you if you have, responses and all that. And then if we can, we'll take another set of questions. You're number 2. No, you're number 3 actually. Number 2 is the gentleman here. Number 3 is you, and number 4 is...
Thank you. My name is Maria Sarungi Tsahai from Change Tanzania Movement, and I have a question for Dr. Enrique. I was taking a look at the signatories of the Budapest Convention, and surprisingly I don't see any state from East Africa that has signed up. And at the same time, what we heard that there's another convention of Malabo as well, yet the East African states have been very quick and very early on adapting cybercrime law. Have you in any way tried to find any comparison, and how difficult is it to get signatories to the Budapest Convention? Thank you.
Thank you for setting a good example and going straight to the question.
Thank you. My name is Kolua Joseph Andrew. I'm from Uganda, the Pearl of Africa. my question is about the cybercrime. Cybercrime is becoming a common vice in many African countries. Yes, it is good, we should fight it, but the problem I see is the corruption of the agencies which are supposed to fight it, especially, for example, the police. How are we going to help our people in this? Thank you.
So you're number 3.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Emmanuel Bensa. I'm from Ghana, ECOWAS Business News. I'm very happy to see a wide panel on from different countries. I have to also say that I've had the privilege of interviewing Mr. Entry Bosiako in 2016 on your show. So I can and confidently say that he has the right expertise to be able to speak to the issues of cybersecurity. And hopefully now that he's in government, he'll be able to offer a pathway. So thank you. It's great to see you doing great things, Mr. Entry Bosiako. No, I'm leading into an important question. So the question really then is, as far as ECOWAS is concerned, is ECOWAS fit for purpose on the issue of cybercrime? How seriously is it taking it? And then also to the question for the Ugandan police official. Uganda police has been playing a critical role in the establishment of the African police mechanism, AFRIPOL. And so it's interesting to see you here, and just like to find out a little bit, if you can speak to that, of whether the AFRIPOL is doing anything seriously on cybercrime to tie up with the regional initiatives that are taking place. Thank you.
Okay, and the 4th.
My name is Olumide. I'm from Nigeria. I'm a legal practitioner. Each time I think about cybercrime, comes to my head is the possibility that some of us in this room are cyber criminals. For everybody who uses the social media, and with the kind of the state of law in my country as we speak, anybody who does anything offensive on social media has committed a crime, irrespective of who finds it offensive. So my question, and what I want us to begin to look at, is the possibility of demarcating, of distinguishing economic cybercrime from what I could call civil, in the case of someone expressing himself on social media and in the process runs foul of the provision of the law of cybercrime. So I think that would help journalists, help social media users to further give them further freedom of speech. That's what we need to begin to look at. Thank you.
4 great questions, and now we go for 4 or more great responses. Let's start with you, Enric. You got a direct question. And
it's on better. Thank you. I understood your question about how difficult it is to come with proper legislation. You also had it about South Africa. Is that true? Africa as a whole. Yeah, it is extremely difficult because in the first place, we're talking about cybercrime, but it is a very general notion. Yeah, it involves any crime, and also crime where there is an element of internet during the crime. So that makes it complicated. It's a very broad area. And it takes so much time to convince countries what exactly to do. The problem is not to criminalize certain conduct. They usually do that. That's not the point. The point is how to have proper provisions, proper procedures on investigation and the collection of electronic evidence. That is actually the main issue. And that is a difficult thing because most of the time the capacity is not there, the technical capacity to collect them. And for the rest, you should have precise procedures when you like to present electronic evidence before court. You cannot just say, here, we have an email. What is that, an email? Yeah, you have to be clear. You collected the email, you printed the email, yeah, you preserved it. Yeah, there is no problem of interference of other people with the text of the email, and then you can present it to court. So that requires precise procedures. When you use equipment, yeah, to collect electronic evidence, the court must be sure that the equipment is reliable. Yeah, so that the evidence, when it is presented before court, indeed is reliable. All those factors, the law, the procedures, the provisions, etc., that require an immense effort to put that in place in a country. And therefore, it takes time and it takes a lot of efforts. If you want to know more, you can address me in the break.
Okay, great. So, Jimmy, you got two key questions. One is about AfriPol, and one is about interesting combination of words, corruption and police. Please speak to those.
Thank you very much. Just bring in about AfriPol, the African police. Actually, AfriPol has now merged with the IAPCO, which is the East African Police Association. One of the efforts they've done has been to establish and fortify the centers of excellence, of which now Uganda is a center of excellence for forensic science, and we are having Kenya is a center of excellence for counterterrorism, and other countries that are coming in and are building support, like in Algeria, where they are building a center of excellence for human resource development. So some of these efforts by AfriPol is also to improve on the MLA, the mutual legal assistance, and how quick they can get support. So AfriPol has already set up what we call technical operating centers under the Interpol offices, the NCRB, the National Crime Records Bureau, and all these are efforts geared towards enhancing technical cooperation. However, it has not yet been realized. These are still discussions going on, and we believe out of AfriPol, probably because the more we build blocks, the better for us to harness and build strength in fighting of crime.
Before you go to the second question, I think it's also important because you've mentioned centers of excellence. Is there any country on the continent that you're working with that is trying to become the center of excellence on human rights compliance?
I'm afraid I have no knowledge of that, probably, unless I do.
Yeah, you can take it. You can take it back to your next meeting.
Yes, please. Okay, then the other issue is about corruption. Well, corruption is a big problem. During the AU meeting last time, one of the reasons they put why most of the African countries are still lagging behind is because of corruption of, first of all, state actors. Because we are the very people who are vested with the responsibilities of providing protection to the citizens. But if we are corrupt, then we let our citizens down. What I can only say, for example, in Uganda, there have been efforts under the judiciary. They have fortified one of the courts, which is called the Anti-Corruption Act Court, and there is a law in instance. There have been efforts to come up with professional standards units, as well as whistleblowing mechanisms that have been domesticated. One of the laws is the Whistleblower Protection Act, and other strategies that are being put in place. I would only encourage such a person, if you know of some of these corrupt individuals, why don't you bring them up in confidence? You can bring them to my office, myself, you can bring them through other approaches, and we can try as our levels to see how to help. Otherwise, corruption is a big vice that you cannot fight on your own. It needs all of us to combine our efforts to name and shame such officers.
So are you empowering us to take pictures of their badge and their face and send directly to you?
It's being done. It's being done.
But just make sure there's no one carrying a gun before you take the picture. All right. I don't know if Benedict wants to speak to a few of the questions.
Yes, of course. I just need to respond to one among the questions, that how do we distinguish between economic cybercrime and civil, of course, civil cybercrime. It's true, I think even in Tanzania, and that's one among the major challenges we are facing, because we are asking ourselves whether the Cybercrime Act or the Electronic Transaction Act, they are there for the intended purpose. Because I may give you an example of one among the sections in our Cybercrime Act, Section 16 of the Cybercrime Act, which say someone who publish false information in a computer system is guilty. So you ask yourself, what is false information? And second, who determined that is false information? And that's why we find a lot of people being arraigned before the court of law just because of the wording of the section itself, but also just because of the law itself. So I think it's nice that in a way we have to distinguish between the real cybercrime offenses and just offenses which just come out of someone who expresses him or herself.
And I think that's important, and I'll give a specific example from Tanzania. So an organization conducts a survey that finds out that the president is 40% less popular than he was a few years ago. And the organization is now being accused of committing a crime because that information is false. Has the president's popularity really deteriorated? Of course it has. But as far as the system, that is questioning that is concerned, that is false. And I think that's dangerous. In fact, in some of the laws, we have, for example, in Nigerian law, where it says, it uses the word. So if insult is going to make you liable to committing cybercrime and go through that process, someone saying to me on my way out right now that I have a big head is probably going to jail. So, Albert.
Thank you once again. And there are two things here. The first is in connection with your statement. When I say careful, what I mean is we need to strike a balance. And as usual, I need to provide an example why I do engage a lot with the civil society. Suleiman knows very well. We've had several discussions, not just several, but pragmatic and frank discussions. I'll bring one issue to the table. When I say a balance, what do I mean? Some few months ago, we all witnessed some incident which happened in South Africa, where some foreigners were being, there were issues between citizens and foreigners, leading to some form of attacks. There were 6 images that were circulating on social media. Those images were examined at the time in the private sector, in my forensic lab. Some of those images were actually picked up, added to newspaper and credible media houses online. I think most of you in Ghana probably witnessed the repercussion. In fact, my role with the ministry is a cybersecurity advisor. So just to bring this out for you to understand where I'm starting from. The images which we examined, only one of them was authentic. They were just manipulated images. Somebody, with a machete hitting person, somebody being bent, and these images were reported together with news item by media houses I would like to mention. Now, what was the consequence of this publication? I was on multi-TV on that particular day. People were calling in, expressing anger, making association with those images. The police had to deploy their elite units to protect South African embassy. Folks, I'm being real here when I say a balance. There is no way my government currently will enact a legislation that will probably undermine. He is a human rights lawyer. Those who knows his history, he will actually stop you. Don't go there. But I need to be what? As a technical person to share this frankness with you. And I've done that severally with the civil society forum. And I've also articulated my expectations. What are we supposed to do as a civil society? It is not enough as a media rights organization. It is not enough to end with affirmation that do not enact the legislation that seeks to undermine people's freedom. Absolutely. What are you doing next? I am challenging you these issues can be handled effectively with awareness creation and capacity building even within your own teams, sincerely. So when I mention a word, I want a balance, and I've made it clear. Let's hold the position, let's promote them, but what are we also doing? And it's a risk. When the citizens are not aware, they cannot distinguish. I had a lab, so we run forensic examination on those images. Can we encourage media houses to be more responsible in terms of authenticating images? Then I need to see action on them. So these are some of the areas that I think we also need to take on board. And this is the balance I'm talking about. A typical example. Number 2, ECOWAS is fit for purpose. And you want me to pronounce a judgment? As a matter of fact, Emmanuel, by the way, thanks for the compliment. I don't remember, but thanks for bringing that memory. I think institutions across, my colleagues are here, African countries, in terms of their operational expectations are below par. I don't think, it cut across sport in terms of some of the weaknesses. And ECOWAS is not in a different category. But what I can assure you is where you sit, as a member of the ECOWAS, what are you also doing to make sure that their operational relevance is brought to bear to impact on the citizens within the region? Indeed, in 2011, ECOWAS directive on cybercrime was passed that was supposed to enhance collaboration within the sub-region because movement of people, movement of goods, and therefore, we need to address that also at the collaborative level. We are working with the World Bank in terms of building capacity, and I did mention earlier for the governance structure to operationalize programs, capacity building program, information exchange, awareness creation. These technical, working groups are being set up. Next month, ECOWAS and World Bank, together with the government of Ghana, is holding a week-long event. It is part of the initiatives to make sure that we bring their relevance. I think probably that is what you want to hear. What are they doing to impact the continent? Fit for purpose, as a human institution, I think they ought to exist. However, in terms of their expectations, I think it's below our expectations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've just been shown something that says shut up in a very polite way. So technically we have less than 5 minutes before we end this. Is there any question that if you don't ask, you're going to feel like coming all the way to this session has not been worth it? Anyone like that? Like, I paid so much to get here, I have to say this. Is there? Okay, so I'm going to hold this mic because this is a 30-second affair. 30 seconds.
Okay, good morning. My name is Damola from Nigeria. My question is to the policeman. I think that for a Nigerian, my question is really about, in your country, are you able to get your police force to even understand laws around cybersecurity? Because that's something that's really big in Nigeria. So the policeman himself doesn't even know that. He doesn't have a right to take your phone and check your messages. And if you have solved that problem, can you advise us so that we can take this back? Thank you.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Thank you, my sister from Nigeria. Yeah, awareness is something that we are doing on a regular basis. We actually call it cybercrime awareness campaigns that we do every quarter, and a quarter that is every 3 months. And majorly we don't just target only those investigating, but we do it under community policing. The art of community policing is where we want to reach out. First of all, we inform the public of their right and also inform the police of their excesses so that they should not go for them. Because one of the risks that is therein, you'll find even at some of the stations, they don't have the capacity to keep electronic evidence or electronic exhibits actually. Because even if you keep it in a temperature that is beyond, you're already damaging that storage itself. By the time it reaches the laboratory, it's already messed up. So it's a process that we are doing together with the other supporting development partners, that is the GILOS sector, justice law and order sector, because if you only inform the police, what about the prosecutors? Do they understand? Will they actually feel that this is a case that has prima facie evidence? And then the same goes back to the judiciary. So I believe you need to approach it just not from the police side, but from the police, the prosecutors, at the same time those who are adjudicating over these cases. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What I want us to do to close this session is for each panelist to say one thing you want us to remember. If you were a participant in this session, what is the one tweet you will type and click send on, so that with the hashtag FIFA Africa 2018, everybody sees that? Just 30 seconds to 45 seconds. What's that one thing you want us to remember leaving here?
I've only one message. I know there is a meeting in October in Nairobi on cybercrime, and I would strongly recommend it to attend and see what is discussed there, because then you may come to details which in this session was not exactly our topic. But thank you very much for your attention.
Well, it's quite tricky to wrap up all this in one statement, but first of all, allow me to pass some bit of knowledge that it's also prudent to realize that the device you carry is meeting some of the global standards. Just in case you get a problem or you have evidence that is on that mobile device, it will make it very easy for the police to investigate. You look out for things like, does your GCM, that's your global system mobile, your mobile phone, does it adapt to standards? Like if you do *#40#, does it eject the mobile model? *#40#, does it? If it doesn't, then there is a big challenge. If your mobile phone, you do *06#, it doesn't eject any information, then you are carrying a device that you would think, in case there is need for you to get support from law enforcement, it will become quite complicated because it doesn't meet some of the ISO and the NIST standards. And then my last statement to you is that cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility, right from all sectors of government and the civil society. We are all prone to become victims of things like identity theft, and that's why we need to all join the champion and the campaign of saying we need to protect ourselves while we are using the internet. Thank you.
That's a Facebook post. We'll take it, not a tweet. Okay, so let's get a tweet from you.
Yes, for me, my tweets, how many words? Okay, for me, my tweets is that cybercrime is still a new thing. So first of all, we should create awareness to law enforcers, and then come to lawyers who implement that law, and to the judiciary.
Okay, that's not quite 280. Thank you. Okay, Albert.
Thank you once again on behalf of the Ministry of Communications, the government. I think I want to assure you Ghana will continue to lead by example as far as promoting the rule of law in the cyberspace is concerned. The message here is digital rights should be accompanied with digital responsibilities. Thank you.
#government endorsed statement. My own tweet is to say thank you for being a great audience. Thank you for, I mean, you guys are experts, and that's why we got the quality of questions that we got. And thank you also to the panelists. Trust me, these conversations are for one reason only, not to make anyone in particular uncomfortable, but to tell ourselves the blunt truth so that we can make progress and not just move from one conference to the other and say the same things, you know, over a long period of time. We must realize that at the moment, rights are not as respected as they should be, and it may be the reason why it appears that people are pushing for more rights than responsibility, because we're already subjected to too many things forcing us to be responsible as if we're kindergarten, you know, kids. So thank you everyone. Enjoy the rest of FIFA Africa 18.